I actually missed Prototype when it first came out. I didn't have much cash at the time and it didn't really look like a game that would interest me. I thought I'd try and broaden my horizons a little bit, especially after Dante's Inferno showed me that action games could actually be fun. So, let's see what I thought of it. You play as Alex Mercer, a scientist infected with an unknown virus that grants him the ability to twist his body into bizarre weapons, regenerate from being shot from everything by an M16 to a Hellfire rocket, and fly by squirting infected blood everywhere. For some bizarre reason, Mercer seems to be morally opposed to this, and despite suffering from total amnesia, the single worst plot device to ever crawl out of a writer's imagination, he wants to hunt down and kill the people who did this to him. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you were given superpowers, I think you'd be pretty damn grateful. And it's not like he's got any major drawbacks. He doesn't seem to sprout blades at random without controlling them, mostly. Anyway, the plot's pretty basic. You've got your standard evil government organisation developing a new super weapon, some sort of biological agent. Mercer gets infected and blah 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 blah. The entire game is basically just Mercer's memories, so you start out the game as some sort of uber-powered death engine at the end of the storyline, and then as you play through to the end of that part, you go back to the beginning of the storyline and get downgraded from death engine to pussy that the Hare Krishnas could take in a straight fight. The developers created an entire game mechanic to slowly reveal the plot and the conspiracy surrounding the whole thing, but it gets tedious and it's impossible to follow it. It's a shame they couldn't find a decent writer to actually string together these nonsensical cutscenes. I think there was a tutorial element that tried to explain it to me, but I haven't been able to make head nor tail of it. The story's a convoluted mess, it makes no sense, and the characters have all the depth of a puddle. But going in a Prototype, I was expecting your standard action game, not an RPG or real-time strategy or any other good genres, so I couldn't really hold the story against it. As long as it's clear where you need to go for your next bloodbath, that's all you need, right? And besides, for that the developers put in map markers. Most games start out easy and then get hard. It's called a difficulty curve, and it's an important part of any game's mechanic. Prototype does do this, but its difficulty spikes like a heart attack victim's cardiograph. You can easily breeze through the first missions or side quests, and then suddenly you're hit in the face by a brick wall. After wailing and gnashing of teeth, you'll make it through said mission, and suddenly it's all a walk in the park again. It's not like I've bought any extra upgrades or anything whilst playing through this mission, so what the hell happened? Speaking of upgrades, Prototype has a simple but effective leveling system. Kill stuff or complete missions and challenges to earn evolution points, that's XP to the rest of the world. Pause the game, buy new special abilities and upgrade existing ones. The better the upgrade, the more XP it costs. Go back, and repeat. No skill trees, no prerequisites for new skills, no bullshit. For what Prototype is, this skill system is perfect. It allowed a good degree of flexibility without becoming the main focus of the game. The only other action game I've seen which did a better job of this was Arkham Asylum. Anyway, I'm sure you're wondering, what about the combat? Well, this is where Prototype really falls on its face, and it also helps to explain the psychotic difficulty curve. At first, combat is a joy. Land, hit enemies with combos, fall back, attack again, mix it up by grabbing something and throwing it into the fray. It's all good. But then the first hunters appear. These things are more annoying than the Purge Troopers in Star Wars The Force Unleashed, and that is saying something. There's a link to my TFU review in the description of this if you're interested in seeing what I mean. But you can't run away from them, and they can throw you around like a ragdoll if you don't pay constant attention to them. And if you have to fight more than one at a time before you've sufficiently leveled up Mercer, which you do in the very first encounter you have with them, the whole thing's going to become a bigger snafu than Gordon Brown's career. But once you get over that, you find hunters become more of a problem rather than a tool to sell control pad insurance. Then Prototype hits you with your second big hurdle, and this one is a real stinker. I can accept the issues with the hunters might be down to me having a poor skill level and not being used to action games, but this next point, this is a bitch. The lock-on system is horrible. It seems straightforward enough. Left trigger locks, right stick controls what you lock onto, flick the right stick in the direction you want to change locked on enemy to, and the whole thing shifts over and you carry on fighting without dropping out of the lock on. Simple, effective, and until later in the game it works a charm. The problem is that in Prototype there are often dozens and dozens of enemies on screen at any one time, but only about 4 of them will actually pose a real threat. To change your target lock from the harmless assault rifle carrying grunt soldier to the big nasty battle tank, you need to cycle through every enemy between the first target and the second. You need to go from generic grunt 1 to generic grunt 2 to generic grunt 3 to generic grunt 4 to battle tank. Holy crap, it's firing a shell at me. There doesn't seem to be any sort of target prioritization built into the game, meaning that if you just drop lock so it's easy to move, point the screen at the biggest target and relock, 9 times out of 10 you're just going to lock onto something harmless that's standing next to it. Imagine in Dynasty Warriors or 99 Nights if you could only use your best attacks on a targeted enemy, and then to target them you had to move your analog stick each time to select a new enemy, all whilst jumping around and defending yourself and getting killed by the big targets which you haven't been able to shoot at yet. That's what Prototype's later levels feel like. The annoying thing is that everything else feels solid. The combos work, even a hunter pack isn't too hard once you've got some upgrades and you're better at playing the game, but this one flaw makes many sections in Prototype so frustrating it's untrue. And it could all be fixed by adding the option to switch off targeting of certain enemies. You know, just an option in the screen, turn off targeting of basic zombies, only target hunters. It would be fiddly, but it would be far less fiddly than what we've got in there at the moment. One other annoying thing is the sandbox element of the game. Simply put, the world is just too large. It takes ages to get from one place to the other, even with a lot of mobility upgrades, and all this dead time just serves to eke the game out and make it feel a lot longer. To be honest though, this isn't a serious gameplay issue, it's just an oversight which occasionally crops up and annoys me. So overall, the gameplay is pretty good. The learning curve is very steep and the tutorials are not helpful. Introducing some of the new powers such as the whip arms as part of the story rather than just an optional upgrade to buy would make more sense, as I was very far into the game before I purchased the whip arms. And suddenly everything became much easier. Then the mass battles started though. And of course those random massive spikes in difficulty are still there as well, and those, let me tell you, will drive even seasoned gamers to the edge of their wit. A polite way to describe Prototype's graphics would be to say that it sacrifices definition for scale. There are only about half a dozen or so different military personnel models in the game, and even less infected. The hunter leader is just a hunter with different coloured skin. But these things are pretty much unimportant, because you're going to be fighting on such a large scale with so many enemies at such a fast pace you will not be looking for fine detail on each of the enemy models. The scenery isn't bad, but you don't get any stunning vistas in Prototype as the draw distance is quite short. It's not short enough to cause an issue with gameplay, but don't expect a stunning view as a reward if you climb to the top of a tall building. Maybe graphics have come a long way since Prototype's release, which is closing on a year old, and that's why it just doesn't look particularly impressive. On the plus side, I didn't experience any slowdown at all at any point, even during the mass battles with smoke effects and enemies all over the place. Not one frame dropped. The emphasis seems to have been placed on the action, above all else, including the story and the graphics. The graphics may have been toned down just to make sure it runs smoothly no matter what kind of scene the game has to generate. All in all, I'd call the graphics functional. Not pretty, but pretty enough for the job. Overall, I'd have to say that Prototype is by no means an awful game, but the lock-on system and obscene difficulty spikes mean that it'll be frustrating to anybody without quick reaction times. Experienced action gamers will probably find an enjoyable few hours here, but anyone else should probably stay clear of it.